Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today's November 23, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here today with Brian W. Woodbury. Brian, where in the heck you calling in from?
I'm calling from Utah. That's where I am right now.
Utah. Well, that's cool. First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
The best thing for a human being. For me, I think the best thing for a human being is just having that close. It can be family. For some, maybe it's not their family, but for me, it is my family. Of just having that interaction of being exactly with the people that you want to be with, and kind of having that contentment of just, you're home, you're with who you want to be with, and life is good.
Dude, I agree 100%. That's what tomorrow is all about, Thanksgiving.
Absolutely.
Eat turkey and be with friends and family. Thank you so much. That's an inspiring first answer. The second question is what's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
My favorite form of information. So like consuming media type of a thing, or in terms of
Well, again, you put it in the context you want, Brian.
okay.
It's like how, we use words. It's basically this is me and you versus the wording on the questions. So
Okay, I got you.
we sort of know there's a commonality in what people call information, but it goes all over the place. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's your hunch. And also it's amazing having you do right off the bat what people don't always do, and that is there's no rush here. Taking time and thinking. That's a musician who knows dynamics. Thelonious Monk. Thelonious Monk. Silence is the loudest sound in the universe.
For sure.
So again, you put in the context you want. I
Okay.
mean,
Well, tell
yeah,
me the question one more time, and I
yeah,
think I
yeah.
got it.
What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
I think for me, information is internalized the best when I am repeating it, or when I am doing something with it. So something really becomes, whether that's in music or whether that's in just learning anything in general, once I am taking that inner information and actually doing something with it in a more practical way, is when it really becomes internalized for me. Before that point, I feel like it's more of an ethereal concept, and but once I start doing some sort of activity that's utilizing that information, is when I feel like I start to understand it a lot better.
It's really good. And why do you think humans collect or gather information?
I think there's a very human desire to just understand the world around us. And I think collecting information is one of the few things that we've figured out can maybe help explain some of the stuff. And so when we're trying to understand the world and our place in it, collecting information is kind of our best attempt to do that, I think.
Do you think this need or want is more innate or more invented by humans?
I'd say it's more innate. Um, I have two little daughters, and I feel like they, from very young age, a 1-year old and a 3-year old, and I see them want to have this information and they want to learn. They're curious about everything. The 1-year old who only has a few words that she says, but she'll point at everything and she'll go, like she wants to know what it is and what words we have to call that thing. So I think it's innate, at least from what I've seen.
Cool. Do thoughts create emotions?
I think thoughts definitely influence emotion. Um, Whether I'd go as far as to say create, I'm not sure. The
Sure.
I think when you're having negative thoughts versus positive thoughts, I mean, that's enough to really set your emotional course for the rest of the day. So I think definitely the thoughts you're thinking have a direct impact on how you're feeling.
Yeah. Very cool, Brian, because that's what I'm after. Like you change the verb, they more influence than create. So that's what I'm open to. Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I
But that could be taken in a lot of a lot of different ways. But the first thing that maybe comes to my mind is I don't know what I think until I'm in that moment. Because I
in the
think
moment.
you can plan for things, you can think, oh, this is going to be the best route to go, or this is what I am wanting to do. But then when you get in the moment, sometimes the situation and your gut instinct and things will tell you something different than maybe what you had thought initially. So that's what I would say.
Beautiful. That's Ram Dass said, be here now. So that was cool. Can humans think without language?
That's very interesting. I would say yes. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard to imagine, just since we are so thought of in terms of language, and everything. Every way we communicate is through language. But um, I mean, I think that that's something that music can manifest itself in that way. In that there isn't often words with music, but you can have ideas that are musical ideas that are floating up in your head, and it's I guess that could be considered a musical language too. But I think even before we understand language, we are thinking about things. So yeah, I think you could think without language. It's definitely more difficult once you have a command over language. But
Yeah, that was good. And we're going to get into music soon. Chomsky says a language is not just words, it's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. Brian, what do you do when language doesn't work, when language breaks down?
um, I think when there isn't that language connection, I think you can find some of those other human elements. So one of them would be through music, but I think another big way is just through acts of service, or actually doing something for another person. Um, is something that no matter what language you speak, you can see that someone's doing something kind for another person, and that communicates even better, I think, than if you were to tell them something. So I think actions speak a lot louder than words. So anytime you can actually do something for that other person, or show through your own actions what you think and believe, that is a clear way to communicate.
Beautiful. I agree, man. Your observations of humans in general. I know it's a stupid question, it's both, and it depends, but your hunch, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
I think we're more feeling beings. I think we like to think that we're more thinking beings because that tends to feel like we have more control over our lives. But I think that ultimately our thoughts are very influenced by our intense reactions to things. You see it with the 24-hour news cycle or social media or anything. You get on there and it's just like everyone's just vomiting what they think are their thoughts, but really it's just kind of their knee-jerk reactions emotionally to whatever they're reading or seeing. And so I would say we're more emotional than
Yeah.
thinking.
Dude, you're an awfully great musician, but you're a good speaker too. You know how to put words together. I appreciate this. So these are two questions from Alan Turing, 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Yeah, I would say so. I think thinking is something that goes beyond our existence on this earth. I think it's something that is I mean, well, I think where there is existence, I think there will be thought as well, because or where there is life, there will be thought. So I think it goes. Yeah, I think thinking goes further beyond than
Great.
just our life here.
Yeah, you're anticipating some questions upcoming very soon. Thank you. Second Turing question is, can machines think?
Yes, I think they can, but it's a different kind of think in that they've been programmed, a certain way to think. So like they can think through problems and solve problems and adapt, but it is only based on how they were initially made and put here, if that makes sense.
Yep. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
I would say the pursuit itself would be more for the meaning, but I think that's where I find the happiness. That makes sense. So, the
Yep.
things that are really important and really matter to me are where I am also finding my happiness. So, I don't find the two to be an either or situation, but they're very linked in that if I'm
Yeah.
pursuing what matters most to me, then that's what's going to make me happy too.
Yeah. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
I mean, I know they say what's the percentage of brain amount that we use? On a, it's less than 10% or something like that. I don't
Yeah.
remember the statistics. So I guess that would point to we're aware of it, and I think there's probably more going on in our own minds than we realize.
Yeah. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
I guess I'd say speed of thought, since it's not something you can really measure. Um, whereas speed of light, people have measured that. So it seems like, yeah, and I don't know, a thought can arrive in your head before you fully understand or are able to put words on it, but it can be in there. So I guess I'd say that.
Yeah, that's good. There's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions. But Brian, that one you got right. Thank you.
Ding ding, woohoo! Do I get a prize?
So Audre Lorde, the poet, says you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded to her and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
That's a tough one. I guess I'll say being true to your own influences and your own ideas and thoughts, being uniquely yourself and not trying to be any other person, I think would
Yeah.
probably be the most helpful tool in
Yeah, it's good. You understand because Tool, people think Tool is a tangible thing. What new toy do you suggest?
What new toy do I suggest? A yo-yo. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. That's a good toy. I love yo-yos. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I'm usually am thinking about the next day, so just um, getting everything I need to do in that day into the schedule of the day, and making sure I have time for everything that I want to do. Um,
Yeah. So Marshall McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound the poet that artists are the antenna of the race. And by artists, I mean musicians, arrangers, painters. Artists broadcast and detect the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might be able to cope with what we don't like about the inventions. So, Brian, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
One more time with the question.
Why do we humans ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though artists are broadcasting them to us?
I think it can be somewhat of a defense mechanism. I think vulnerability comes when
Yeah,
we are transparent about things and what we're really feeling and thinking. So, and I think art is a great way of kind of making society be more transparent. And so, um, yeah, I think it's just that amount of vulnerability that comes from that we get uncomfortable with.
it's good. You use some great words there. Vulnerability is something I'm always trying to study and understand, and transparency. Thank you. Do artists have moral obligation?
Um, it depends on what type of art you want to make. I think there can be art that is made that isn't moral. That's not the type of art that I would be interested in making. But so yeah, I think again going back to the being true to your own voice. If you're in a moral person, making moral artistic decisions maybe isn't gonna give you the true music that you're wanting to make. But yeah, I
It's really good. Appreciate it. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
That depends. I think there are things that I fear from about both of them. I feel like new ideas, there's that fear of how I've been doing everything has been wrong this whole time or hasn't been the right way. And I think I fear old ideas for the opposite reason of, do we just have these ideas because they are old? And so I guess that one seems more dangerous growth wise. So I guess after talking through it, I will say I'm more fearful of old ideas. Just us taking for granted anything that could be a new idea,
Yeah.
just because we have the old ideas.
Very good. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
That's tough. When you go that far back, you don't really know what year it was or how old you were or anything like that. So I will. Oh. Okay. Well, I'm remembering back to preschool. I'm sure I had memories before this, but I remember there was this kid. I don't remember his name, but every time I would show up to class, he would do this whole bit where he'd say, "Brian, you're alive," and like it was like just a miracle that I had survived the next day. And I always thought that was one of the stranger things, but that was I guess that's a silly early memory I have.
That's good. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
I'd say more a blessing. If you can remember things better, then you are more likely to learn from the past and learn from past mistakes, as well as past successes and things that make you happy. But I think the more experiences you have, um, the better off you'll be in terms of the decisions you're making. So the more you can remember the
Yeah.
past things, then
Brian, tell me someone within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you like a role model. And what specifically was that impact?
okay. Inside my family, I would probably say my father is the first that comes to my mind. Um, he and I are very similar in a lot of ways. We have the same sense of humor, and we'll often, make the same joke at the same time or something like that. And so that's really fun. So I would always tell my friends growing up that like my dad, yeah, he's just like me, except for he's a lot nicer. Um, so I feel like my dad is just always he's really good at making whoever he's talking to feel like the most important person in the room. Um, and so whoever he's interacting with, they actually feel important and loved. And I just remember watching from a young age, seeing him interact with people, and it could be like a server at a restaurant or something like that, and kind of watching them walk away from the interaction. And I can tell that they were feeling better about themselves just because they were interacting with my dad. So,
What a great
um,
trait. Yeah, beautiful trait.
yeah. And then outside of my family, I'll say there are a lot of people I could say here. But one that during my when I was getting my master's degree, there was a professor, John Murphy, and he just had a little bit of different way of looking about things. He was a very thoughtful person, and anytime he would be teaching in class, he would take pause, both to so that he would know how to better answer the question, and also so that we could digest the questions that he would ask us. He would ask a question and be like, "Okay, I'm going to go take a drink of water now, so that you can think about the question that I just asked," and give time for that. So just the amount of thought he put into things. He also, I feel like a lot of professors, they will get into, they'll be teaching a subject for 20 plus years, and they get into like, oh, finally I have a routine with this, and so I don't really have to think about it much. He would reevaluate every semester, and he would change what book he was using, and he would just completely change everything because he was just a sponge for new knowledge. And what we're saying about new and old ideas, he was always wanting the newest ideas, and so he was constantly evolving his teaching and how he was teaching, even though it probably would have been easier to just kind of get into a routine of things. So I admire that a lot about him, and it was a good example to me of just making sure I'm always learning and always moving forward, and not being content with just the
Yeah.
status quo.
Yeah, the courage to refresh, really beautiful. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Yes, I was born my parents are both members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or Mormons. So I grew up that way. I think both sides of my family come from the pioneers. So I go way back into the Utah roots there.
Do you pray?
I do.
If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I think what I would most like to hear is just, welcome back. I love you. Just kind of feeling that personal relationship that can be a little bit harder to feel here, since we're, mortals, or
Yeah.
however you want to think of that.
I went to Charles Brown's wake service, a great jazz and blues singer, and Solomon Burke said, "We're celebrating a homegoing." I
like
thought
that.
that was a great word to say, a homegoing.
That's awesome.
Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I think everyone has their own ability to act. So when they start to make decisions to do evil or to be evil, then I think that is something that they choose. But I think it can get to a point where they don't have a choice anymore, if that makes sense. So I think at the impetus of it, they're just people that end up choosing evil.
Yeah. Well, the real hidden question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I set up with a few modern thinkers. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob in The Samurai, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. Brian, the basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I like that in a lot of ways. I think it works to the extent of not letting the enemy know that you are like very affected by them. I think it is important in that aspect, in terms of, I do think it's important to acknowledge the enemy just in terms of like yourself. You're like, yeah, I know that person exists, but to not let them know that it's affecting you, I think is a very important thing.
Wow, that's heavy. I love that. Thank you. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
I think we're really good at having our life become mundane, or there might be aspects of our life that we aren't happy with, or we start to be frustrated by things that aren't in our control in our life, that we can't that we find ourselves going up against. And I think going to see theatrical productions or movies or things like that are a way that we can go watch something that someone has created full control over this thing that they're watching. So you can go and you can go watch a movie that is going to have a happy ending, or one that is going to have a surprise ending, and it's just something that you have a little bit more control over. And so I think it's a way of escaping from reality often, rather than a way of mirroring reality.
Yeah, it's really good. McLuhan talks a lot about that, changing or knowing the difference between making and matching.
Hmm.
Matching is like mirroring, making. So let's go into that. Great concept and practice you pursue. One of my favorite things in the world, music. Tell me the tipping point when you, like, you're growing up. Are your parents playing music live? Are they playing tape music? Are they taking you to the concerts? Where did you go, I want to be that, I want to pursue doing music? And then picking the trombone in particular, was that they said, okay, here's your choices, or they go, you're doing trombone? So those two tipping points, pursuing music and trombone.
Yeah. So I mean, neither of my parents played an instrument. My dad did choir and stuff through high school and liked to sing, and plays very. I guess he does play very basic beginner guitar. My mother isn't musical at all, and but then so I have two older brothers, and my oldest brother, when he was born, since the time he could talk, he was asking my parents for a violin and saying, I want a violin. And they're like, okay, sure, yeah. And he's like 2, and finally they get him one of those toy violins for kids, and he says, no, I want a real violin. And so by the time he's 4, they actually give him a real violin, and he just kind of takes off as this prodigy almost, where he's got perfect pitch, where he can tell you, like, yeah, that's 10 cents flat, or and just like very musically gifted person. And so he got really into it from a young age, and so that got the rest of us into it. It's just like, oh well, my older brothers play music, so I'm going to do that. So I grew up going to my brother's concerts and hearing them play and seeing how that made me feel, and I was like, okay, that's something that I want to do. And I actually started violin when I was 6 or 7, and I only played it for a few months because I've always been very hard on myself. I was a perfectionist, and so I would get very frustrated when I would make mistakes or I feel like I wasn't playing well enough. And so my mother made me stop. And then I picked up the piano. That was from probably age 7 to age 8. And I got pretty good. But again, I wasn't mature enough to understand how to be hard on myself in a good way. Um, so then when it got to be 5th grade and it was time to choose instruments for school band or orchestra, I really wanted to play the trombone or the trumpet. My brother played violin and saxophone, and my other brother plays the trombone. And I said, "Oh, I want to play the trumpet. I really like the trumpet. I liked listening to Maynard Ferguson or whoever." And uh, my my mom said, "No, why don't we play trombone?" And so I ended up playing trombone. I realized it's because she thought I would quit it. And so she picked the instrument that we already had in the house, which was the trombone. So I always say the joke's on her because I'm the one who's still doing it.
The joke's on her. Yeah, but it's your career, so there's not a joke. She's probably happy. You make your living. So a screenwriting teacher told me great film, great music, great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says a great film, great art, great music is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're writing an original Brian Woodbury song? And I mean an original Brian W. Woodbury song.
Yeah, so I would say that intention plays a big part in my writing of it, but then once it's written, the intention is completely gone, if that makes sense. So when I'm writing a piece of music, how intention is important to me is I look at the notes and the chords and every aspect of it and say, like, does this need to be here? Does this need to be here? Not necessarily in terms of like this is supposed to convey X, Y, or Z, but like, is this note making this phrase better, or does it need to be there? And so kind of cutting out things like that. I like to be very intentional with what there is in my composition, but then once once that happens, I think I would. So I guess for the creation process, I try to be very intentional with it, but I think the actual art itself, the intention behind it doesn't matter. So I'd be more in line with how Kubrick thought of things, because I think some of the best works of art people have different reactions to. One person can look at it and be like, "I hate this," and
Yeah.
another person can go like, "Yeah, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." And so I think eliciting some type of a response so that someone can have some type of a feeling is, um, I think that's the best art, something that makes you feel something, and so that will be different depending on who the listener or viewer is of whatever that art is.
Yeah. That's good because I'm in experimental film world deeply, and after a screening, I'll say, 10 short films, I'll go, "Was there anything you loved or hated?" Or, and they'll go, "Well, I love that. I didn't hate anything." Well, come to think of it, I hated that one. And it's like they don't want to use that word, but it
Uh-huh.
is what you said, eliciting a response, a feeling. It's like that horrible thing we feel obliged when you're introducing a concert or some piece of art. You go, "I hope you enjoy it," to the audience. It's like, don't
Mhm.
tell me to enjoy it. Nobody ever goes, "I hope it elicits a response," but it's just
Yeah.
the common thing because you want them to think you're opening it up and saying, "Enjoy it." It's like, but Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. When you're writing a piece of music, how much are you thinking of your listener?
I would say from the beginning, I'm not thinking of a specific audience for anything. In fact, when I come up with a musical idea, I usually will just sing it into my phone or something, and it will just be kind of a seed of an idea more than anything. Um, and then when I start to work through it and develop it, that's when I'm like, oh, I think this would be good for this type of ensemble or for this style of piece. But when I first have the ideas, I'm not thinking in terms of like I want to write like a swing tune, or it's just like the idea just comes out. Um, and then I think where I think about the audience is more if I'm doing something that's a little bit more cerebral, like, oh, why don't I try this where I have like some sort of a diverging axis in the melody or something like that. Is can I do that with having it be something that someone who isn't looking at the nuts and bolts of the music can go like, oh yeah, I still appreciate that, even though they might not know like, oh, that's some really hairy flat 13 sharp 11 whatever chord, but it's like, oh, okay, like that sounds interesting. So I guess just making sure that the music never gets to be where it's cerebral for cerebral's sakes, but is
Yeah,
more about how it sounds.
very well put. The song "The Other Brian Woodbury" is how we met, and my favorite. And I think the lyrics are one of Brian's best written
Yeah,
songs.
he
The
did
lyrics are
amazing with
just
that.
but my favorite line in the song is when he turns to you and he goes, "Hey, would you mind?" And deservingly, you're doing something like, "Hey, I'm singing here and I'm the star of the song. You mind?" I mean, if you think of those words, "Hey, do you mind?" It's like it's connects directly to your thing cerebral. Like, do you mind? There's so many meanings to that word mind there.
Mhm.
Like, but McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. So knife and fork extend our teeth, clothing extends our skin, uh, shutter in a camera extends our eyelid. Even non-tangible religion, philosophy, it could extend consciousness. What does the trombone extend for you? What humanness?
Yeah, I would say that the trombone is an extension of the voice.
Yeah.
So I mean, a lot of instruments, like the the reed will be vibrating on a woodwind instrument, and that's what creates the sound for brass. It's the lips and the air behind the lips. So to me my voice and the trombone are very linked. So yeah, I would say it's just an extension of my voice, and that's just like, that's how I sing, is through the trombone type of a thing.
Beautiful. And are you a singer as well?
I mean, I did choir in high school and things like that. I wouldn't call myself a singer by any stretch of the imagination, but I can carry a tune without it being terrible. But no, I'm not a singer.
What's the function of music?
I think music serves a function for both the performer as well as the listener. I think the function for the performer is an ability to express some of the deepest thoughts and emotions that you have, and they might not be able to be expressed in any other way. And then I would say, as a listener, it's a way to connect with the world around you, as well as to just to feel. It's like a gateway into feeling different emotions, I think.
Yeah. In fact, led perfectly into this. Two of my film heroes have these mantras: ignore yourself, there's no self-expression. In fact, Cecil Taylor, great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Again, it's a stupid question. I know it's both and it depends, but just your hunch, Brian. Is music making more self-expression, or more it's a vehicle for whatever technology, culture, and environments are dominant?
I would say that it is more self-expression, but with the caveat of that self-expression is you're expressing yourself and all of your influences. So a lot of that will be the culture around you, but luckily with the digital age, with the internet and stuff like that, doesn't have to be the influence from your zip code. You know, you can pull all, like, you pretty much anything that you like and anything that you're exposed to, and you go like, oh, that's very interesting. That becomes part of who you are. And I think that's what makes artists different from each other, is just that they have different interests in what they like to consume in terms of art, and that leads to them creating different types of art because they have a different eclectic group of influences that they have, versus, you know, everyone being like, yes, we listen to these same four artists, all of us, and so we're just going to regurgitate that music. But it's like, oh, I listen to this Israeli bassist, as well as, you know, attending a Baptist church, or, you know, like, all those things can influence who we are as well as the music that's coming out.
Yeah. Yeah. James Brown's drummer lived in Ohio, and they said, you know, you're the architect of funk drumming. Where'd you get it from? He says, there's a train track on one side of my house and a factory on the other. So it's like, boom, boom. But it was Land's musician said Missy Elliott learned how to sing from car alarms. you know, I mean, it's normally you learn how to sing at the church. So really the hidden question there, though, is really well done, is can music making be egoless?
I would say yes. I would say that the best music is, at least coming from a jazz context, I think the best music that is made in jazz is when players don't come in with any preconceived notion of, like, I'm wanting to do X, Y, or Z in this solo, but they just kind of let the music come to them. And oftentimes the choices that they're making are to, you know, not play, like you were talking about with Thelonious Monk, of the silence is more is louder, and So I would say, the choice to put space in your solo, or to, lay out for a few choruses while someone else is playing, is in itself, a, an act of getting rid of the ego. So I think the best music does that, whereas I think music that is more just coming out of ego, it doesn't quite connect with people in the same way, and
Yeah,
doesn't have kind of that magical collaborative quality.
it's really great. It is beautiful what you said, and it reminded me of I've learned, because I'm always saying, "Oh, he's just a J.J. Johnson wannabe," or he's just
Mhm.
a Hendrix wannabe. And so we get so much of that, and it's like, how do you absorb your influence and then abandon them? That's hard, you know. And Ben Ratliff, a music writer, says, I mean sound as it has long functioned among jazz players, as a mystical term of art, as in every musician finally needs a sound, a full and sensible embodiment of their artistic personality, such that it can be heard at best in a single note. So me and you could probably hear Miles Davis one note and go, that's Miles. And so Ben would say his sound is fragile and pointed. Said Coleman Hawkins is mellow and generous. Coltrane was slightly undercooked and urgent. Is that right? If a music writer that you really respected heard the Brian W. Woodbury sound, what two adjectives or two words you would feel most honored that they would say, that's Brian's sound?
Oh, wow. What I would feel most honored if they said?
Yeah, or, just you would like that they wrote those two words, or even your own. I'm having trouble. This is a new question for me. When I say feel most honored, then people feel they want to be humble. But I shouldn't say most honored. I probably should say something. What two words do you describe your sound as? I don't know. You tell me what's a better way to word it. Should I say a um, um, a music writer you respect's description or your own? So it's a hard one there. So you tell me which one it would be better for you to answer, you would rather answer, and then you can answer it. I
I'm
hope.
just trying to think how to answer one of them.
Yeah.
That's never anything I've ever thought about, which I probably
Well,
should.
you got to admit you have a sound, because I'll tell you why. When the other Brian heard your album, he was like, "Whoa, this guy's good." Now Brian's a deep musician. I know his stuff very well, and he's been at it for many years, and he's really vast in his knowledge of music. So for him to say, "Hey, this guy has got my name, but he's also got a great sound," that was cool. I thought that he recognized that to the point where he said, "We've got to do something about this." I got to tap into this guy's creativeness.
Well, I think I'll do what I would like someone to say.
Yeah,
I don't know what I would say, or,
yeah.
but I think, and they won't be as clever as those ones that you already said, 'cause those are fantastic descriptions, but, I think a couple things that are important to me are, uh, clarity
Nice.
and warmth.
Really good words. That's great. Warmth and clarity. So another friend of mine says the three T's of music are technique, theory, and taste. So you've learned all the technique on the trombone, or a lot of it. You know the theory because you can teach music theory. How does one acquire taste?
I think in my limited experience, how I would answer that would be once you can listen to music that you don't like or music that you have never liked and you can start to appreciate it, or you study it enough to where you appreciate it and you can separate your own opinions on it with recognizing the level of quality that it is. I think for me that's an important step in developing musical taste, just so that you're not rejecting something just because it's different or not the most accessible thing to what you would normally listen to. But once you can kind of open yourself up to new ideas by really making yourself understand the music and trying to understand it on its own value and not by your own set of values,
Yeah.
a lot of, and I think every music program goes through this in colleges, where it's like, we have this set way of teaching music where the values that we're putting on music is based off of this, Austro-German music from the 1800s. Whereas, that's not a great way to judge a lot of music. That's not a great way to judge jazz music. Some jazz music, sure, that's a fine way to judge it, but you've got to kind of understand that every music has its own different expectations and its own barometers of what makes it good. And so understanding those, and then once you understand several different ones of those, even of music that you don't like, then you can kind of start to feel like you have more taste for it.
It's really good. McLuhan said song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference. Any comment?
I think that's interesting. And I think that yeah, I think I mean, especially obviously music that has words in it, it's gonna be vastly different. But even music without, I think, you go to South America or Cuba or something like that, and their rhythms will have a general complexity that's a lot more complex than what we would probably hear on the radio most times. And so I think a lot of that is a different language, different culture. But I also think that it's something that can make you like music because it's not from your culture, if that makes sense. Like you can like how Spanish sounds as an English speaker, or vice versa. And it's the same thing with the music. I'd be like, oh wow, I really like listening to Middle Eastern music because like this just has a whole different set of sounds and notes that isn't super familiar to me, and I'm so inundated with what is familiar to me that like maybe I'll gravitate to what isn't, just because the difference is cool.
Yeah, dude, I love that. Cool. It's cool. Now you're talking jazz. But you really loaded you evoked a lot there. T.S. Eliot said, poetry can communicate before it's understood. So, I can really get into the tuba throat singers, and it's transcendental music to me. But then I found out they're singing about three things: their boots, the horses, and snow. Like, to me, it's like, whoa, way beyond that. But you really touched on this. You helped me a lot. Separate your own opinion. If you don't like it, then you might learn how to appreciate it. But McLuhan has this great line that says, understanding is not having a point of view. So we think when we understand something, we like it or dislike it. No, understanding is understanding the big picture, comprehensive awareness. It's not necessarily you have to like it or dislike it. You understand it. And then
That's
Igor
cool. I like that.
Stravinsky, yeah, it's really a great line. And Igor Stravinsky nailed it. He said, most people don't know what they like what they know.
Yeah.
So if you feed kids certain type of music, we in the 60s, we grew up with reggae before it was called reggae. It was Desmond Decker and the Israelites. It was just pop music. We grew up with Mighty Mouse. He was singing opera. We grew up with gospel as pop music. That was Oh Happy Day by Edward Hawkins. It was really vast how much genres we were hearing. And then our parents were playing American musicals, and that's how we were learning jazz and blues. But we didn't know we were learning jazz and blues from that. My sister brought home Led Zeppelin 2 in the early 70s, and I didn't know what the blues was, although I had heard the blues in Gershwin or, musicals. But then I was like, what the heck is this? And then my friend says, dude, that's Chicago blues. It's like, what? So I learned it backwards, So Copeland has the four elements of music or ingredients as melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. So, the first question, being a music educator, in layperson's terms, how would you describe what is tone color?
That's definitely the hardest one of those sorts. um, yeah, it just reminds me of I think it's often attributed to Zappa, but I think it's attributed to a few different people. But the whole writing about music is like
Yeah.
dancing about architecture.
Yeah.
So I feel like that when I talk about stuff like tone color. Yeah, I guess just the essence of the sound at its core, how full it is, how warm or dark it is, how thin it is, how airy it is. There are a lot of different variables that go into
Yeah.
what tone is, and
Yeah.
all of them have an effect in it.
So then on all four, Brian, melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. Like your piece, Newspeak, which I really enjoyed, you said it's based more on the voice leading than the harmonic function. But when you're composing your own music, how do you navigate those four elements, melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color? I mean, is it all equally, you're just balancing them, or are you more a rhythm person or more a harmony person? I mean, how do you integrate those four elements?
Yeah. So for me, I think that the melody and rhythm are very linked to me. So when I'm coming up with a melody, it's like I'm improvising, or oftentimes I will do that. I will just, you know, press record and I'll just play something melodically, but sometimes I will have a rhythmic idea. So I guess hmm, I think usually my idea is one of the things. So I'll have a harmonic idea, or I'll have a rhythmic idea, or I'll have a melodic idea. Um, I don't think I've had I I more rare. I have had tone ideas before too, but that's more for like if I'm writing for a large ensemble or something. So I think I usually one of those things will come to me, and I will look at that and I'll compare it with other ideas that I've had in the other categories and kind of start combining them.
Yeah.
Be like, oh, okay, I feel like these work well together, or I'll have a melodic idea and I really like the pitches of it, but I think the rhythm is kind of maybe the rhythm square or something like that. And so I will take a look at that melody and be like, okay, well, how can I, taking what I know or just my instincts from other music that I've learned, of like, okay, how can I make this rhythmically interesting as well as the pitches. Yeah.
Yeah, that was good because, the other Brian Woodbury song, my friend Andy Sinisi's playing drums. He's a monster drummer. I
Yeah,
mean,
he's
I've
great.
I've worked with that guy. He's great. And it's like I need that foot tapping thing. I'm just that type of person. I want to tap my foot. But I love music that abandons. And there's arrangements in that song that are amazing. And I know it was a combination of you two working together as the Brian Woodbury arrangement sound. Well, which Brian Woodbury are you talking about? But I asked Brian this years ago, and I said, Sun Ra, Mingus, and Zappa have these solos going on in their songs sometimes, and it's so much like a DNA strand that you can't tell if the solo is written or is improvised. And I'm glad you're nodding your head because you get it. And I said that to him, and Brian goes, well, that's called arrangement. And I'm like, well, it's a little more like you're tricking the in super knowledgeable listener. How much did that happen because of this? I know it's arrangement, but I don't know if you could talk about that, just your attraction to being an arranger and then working with Brian. Was it 50-50 on the arrangements? Because that song goes all over the place and it's amazing what happens.
Yeah, so for the other Brian Woodbury song, he had written out the melody and words. I mean, he did all the words for all of it, but he had, when he first approached me with it, he had the intro and the A section, and he had words for the B section, and he said, why don't you write a melody to this? And so he sent me a track where he was just speaking the rhythm of the words. So he sent me a track where he's just saying, why'd he have to go and get the same name that I've got? And so he wanted me to put the music in harmony with that basic rhythm. And so and then some of the other sections, he would have kind of a bass idea, or like he had a piano part that he had written and said, okay, can you add trombones to this? And so then I, would add. So I wrote all the trombone parts for the song as well. But the brunt of the work was done by the original Brian Woodbury.
Yeah. But go to arranging. I mean, you are
Uh-huh.
an arranger because I've heard your Lush Life. That's beautiful. And so what's jump off on my thing about that. How do you tell the solo? Any thoughts on that? Because I'm still not even articulating it what I'm trying to say, but I think you've probably heard enough Mingus, Sun Ra, and Zappa, that and there's probably a lot of others, Henry Threadgill, it's endless, who
Yeah.
you could give me examples of other people who do that, where is that written solo or not? Or
Yeah, I think that's just, I think the best arrangers and the best improvisers, I think they're also good at the other, if that makes sense. So I think
yeah, I see.
the
Yeah.
best improvisers aren't thinking of it as like, okay, now it's my solo. They're just like, what needs to happen next in this song? So they're thinking of it almost as an arranger. And so when you can't tell, that's because they did a really good job of like, instead of having it be like, we're going to play through the head. Now beat one of the first measure, I'm going to start my solo. And it's like very delineated, like you might hear with more beginner type groups, but with some of those advanced groups that can go, that where it's harder to tell, what's the solo or what's not. That's because they're actually just thinking about the direction that the music is going and where does this solo need to take it. And so it will work in seamlessly with the arrangement, because they're thinking about the overall music of the piece and not just like, okay, this says D minor, let me play my D minor stuff, but kind of
Yeah.
having it grow out of the melody naturally.
My D minor stuff. That's it. You always fall back on your licks in your safe licks. And that's like Don Preston, the great keyboardist, played with Zappa and Elvin Jones, and he helped change John Coltrane. He said, "Don't think." It's like, yeah, right. Don't think. It's like back to thinking at the beginning. Bridget Bardot says, "When I make love, I don't think." And it's like, good luck, like you're doing the most sensuous thing your body can do and you're shutting off your brain. That's like, how do you do that? And that's probably what great musicians are doing when they're soloing, is not thinking. But at the same time, they are. I mean, Monk said music is math. It's mathematics. But he's the most non-mathematic guy. But anyways, it's interesting. Monk said there are no wrong notes. Any comment?
I totally agree. It's the
As a music teacher.
yeah. I mean, I guess if you're playing a written piece by Beethoven or something like that, there are wrong notes that you can play. But I think the more than what notes you're playing, the direction the notes are going are more important. So you can take any note and you can make it work. And the greats do that. They will take any note, and the way they play it is just so right because it's leading into something. And so I think the direction of the musical line is a lot more important than the actual, like, what note is this? And like, oh, this note doesn't fit with this chord.
Yeah, that lecture Herbie gave just a couple years ago where he hit a wrong note with Miles, and Miles looked at him, and then he gave him that confidence that, how good are you going to cover this up? How good are you going to integrate this? And that was a major lesson for him. But Miles Davis talks about the space between notes. In fact, George Clinton, one of my heroes, says funk is the absence of. How do you navigate silence? I mean, it's easy for me to ask that, I guess, that we know that there's silence in dynamics in music because they're just bombarded by sound for the whole 4 minutes or the whole, piece. So how did you learn that silence is important, and how do you navigate it? Yeah.
Well, it's a work in progress still, for sure. I think silence is one of those hard things where you practice so many different things, and you want to show all the theory, and like you want to utilize everything that you've learned. And silence is one of those things that you have to actively, like, check yourself on and be like, okay, like, am I using enough space? And so actively inserting silence is one thing. I also think when you're composing music, it kind of goes along with what we were talking about with the soloist and the arranger. But when you're looking at the piece of music that you're writing, asking yourself the question of, like, okay, what does this need? And if it's been like really busy and really active for a long time, like, it will probably need to breathe at some point, unless you're going for just like an energy jazz piece or something like that. But so looking for places where you can make that breathe, and whether that's through actual silence from the whole band, or whether that's from, like, okay, we've been chugging along in this 4/4 sequence, but it feels like it's just kind of hitting us over the head a little bit. So why don't we add in like a 6, like an extra bar at the end of this phrase, and so instead of an 8-bar phrase, we do a 9-bar phrase, so that there's just that extra room for it to breathe a little bit more, and so that there's enough space for something else to happen, or for nothing to happen.
Yeah, nothing to happen. That's a great Zappa line. Nothing is what I want. Yeah, in fact, he was caught in a lobby once by these, I think, big government officials, and they go, Frank Zappa and his band are right here, do something. And Frank conducted the band in a total pantomime, no sounds.
That's amazing.
But I'm a fan of Domi, this keyboardist.
Yeah.
She's like the new Stevie Wonder meets Joe Zawinul as Art Tatum. I mean, it's quite amazing. I mean, you just watch her play the Flintstones theme in 1 minute. Don't need no production, just Flintstones for 1 minute. I'm like, and she knows how to do silence. She knows, but it reminds me of my stupid question I used to ask people all the time, Jazzbos, who's better, Art Tatum or Oscar Peterson? Well, they wanted to say Oscar because they said Oscar wrote songs. But in essence, Art's improvisations on standards is him writing a new song almost, his improv. So that you really covered that arranging improviser soloist thing. Good for me. It helped me. What's more fundamental, Brian, music or language?
I think music.
Yeah.
I think it happens. I mean, to talk about my daughters again, before they can speak, that's definitely not the first sounds they're making. The first sounds they're making are not words. They're vocalizing. They're going or they're banging stuff, and they like how that sounds. Every time one of my daughters gets into like a place with more of an echo, like a bathroom or a garage, they can't resist just going like just to like hear the sound behind it. So yeah, I think music is more fundamental.
Tell me an instrumental that makes you laugh.
Let's see, it's from his newest album. I was just thinking of Marshall Jokes. He's this fantastic trombonist. Let me make sure I don't get the wrong.
How do you spell his last name?
Gilkes. And so I think it was his track "Scene Filtro" on his last album, Cyclic Journey. Just when I heard that first, I laughed just because of how stupid good he is at the trombone. So like there wasn't anything comical about what he was playing. It was just comical that like he can do that.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's like funny. watching Michael Jordan or something like that, just make an impossible shot, and you just have to laugh because it's just like, how do you do that?
Yeah. And it's amazing because laughter we think is dependent on words, but it's not necessary, And so Ruth Draper is this great performance artist. She said the key is to bring the audience up onto the stage and into the scene with you. It is they who must give you even more than you give them in the way of imagination and creative power. So being a musician, you also perform live. How do you do that? How do you bring the audience up onto the stage with you?
That's a very good question, and it's so different depending on the different audiences. If you're playing a jazz club for people who came to hear straight jazz, or if you are playing in a top 40 wedding band for a drunk bachelor party, like that type of thing, that it's so different. But I think something that everyone wants to see and something that gets people involved is that you aren't playing music to not make mistakes, but you're playing music that's taking risks. You're playing music that is letting yourself be vulnerable. People want to hear something real, and so if they just hear you could play a MIDI file for them and it would play the piece perfectly type of a thing, but that's not
Yeah.
what they want to hear. They want to hear the human element of like,
Yeah.
So I think that's a great way of bringing them in with that. Another way, if you're playing music that they might be more unfamiliar with, is just giving them a couple of actual non-musical clues, like telling them a little bit about the piece first. I've
Yeah.
found really can make a difference for if someone who's someone who's just a layman to whatever music you're playing, if they don't understand it, if you throw them a bone a little bit of like, oh, this was written by this person in this situation, and it's, then it can kind of suck them in a lot more.
Yeah. Beautiful. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Musically speaking, I would say conviction. Because if there's not conviction present, then there's nothing to compromise on. So to have any compromise, you need to have at least, some type of a good idea happening, or some type of conviction from someone. So I'd say that one's more essential. Um,
You've accomplished a lot, Brian. Rate these three elements: luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third, in your accomplishments?
um, I think ambition would be number one. Then yeah, skill is a weird word, because a lot of that, you aren't born with the skills, and that comes from, working on the ambition part of things. But anything that isn't worked on is, I guess, would be in the luck category. So maybe ambition, then skill, then luck, I guess.
Yeah. It's also said the more you practice, the luckier you get.
Yeah.
Is perception reality?
No, I think you can perceive things that aren't real, and um, that doesn't make perception any less important, though. Um, Even if
Yeah.
it's not real, I think perception is still important.
Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
Hmm. I mean, that's tricky, because I feel like the things that I believe, I don't think are impossible, but I think that other people would look at it and be like, yeah, that's impossible. Like going back to like belief in God, or, you ask me if I pray type of thing. I think that would be something that I believe in, that others would think is impossible, but I don't think it's impossible because I believe it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
that's
it's
interesting.
kind of a Yogi Berra answer for it, but
Yeah, I like that. That's one of my heroes. So yeah, it's like Sun Ra was he actually quoted in the New Yorker. Can you believe that? He got in the mainstream press finally. He says, "The impossible attracts me because everything possible has been done and the world didn't change." So Brian, you've been doing this for years. Tell me one major element of your creativity in music that's stayed the same, and one major element that's changed in the years you've been doing this.
I think one thing that's stayed the same is just the joy that comes from performing or playing or making music with other people or even by yourself. I think that there's just this. I think it can be a transcendent experience, and that I feel like that happened as a beginner, and it happens now. Um, Something that has changed. I would probably go back to taste. I feel like as a younger musician, there was a lot less that I liked, or I would be more picky with, what I thought was good music versus not good music. And I feel like the older I get, the more I find that there's a lot good that I maybe wouldn't have thought was good when I was younger.
Yeah, I agree. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Uh, this isn't put it in a completely different context than music, but when I was I said that I was really hard on myself as a kid. I suffered from depression. Growing up, by the time I was like fifth grade, I think I started to have actual depression, and started to take medication and things like that to treat it. And so I think that's something that I would perceive as a weakness, or it seemed like a weakness at the time, but having gone through it and fought through it, and developing coping mechanisms, and just kind of understanding how someone feels when they're going through that, I feel like is a really great strength to have. Of
Yeah.
like, well, I'm not crippled by it anymore, which is fantastic, but like I know what that feels like. And um yeah, I guess it just goes back to that understanding. I feel like I can understand a lot more, and I can help others a lot more just because I had that weakness.
Yeah. It's pretty good. Brian, you think you got that on your own or more from the way your parents, that awareness sort of level you have?
Sorry, it cut out for a little bit.
Yeah. Do
Can
you
you repeat
think
that?
you got this, what I call high awareness level, this, trying to understand and be aware? Do you think you got that more on your own or more from the way your parents raised you?
Um, I mean, it definitely has come from both. I don't know if I could say that one is more than the other, but I think my parents, raised me in a way where they wanted me to think about, what I was doing, why I was doing it, those
Yeah.
types of things. And then I think just one of the great things about music is you're constantly evaluating things, and taking a step back and looking at it, and um, kind of seeing what you need to improve, or what you do like about what's happening, and kind of taking note of that. And I think that easily translates into non-musical elements when you've been practicing that from a young age. So I think that's benefited me in that realm.
Yeah. Well, we just got about 5 more minutes. Truly been a delight, Brian. You're really a smart guy, man. I'm lucky that the other Brian Woodbury got us together.
Okay, me too. No, you've asked. I don't think I've ever had such thought-provoking questions asked of me, so it's really
Well,
fun.
you've been doing great. Here's just a couple more and we're out of here. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Oh, 12-year-old Brian. Oh boy. Um, I guess just enjoy every moment,
Yeah.
no
Cool.
matter your stage or no matter what crap you're going through. Just try and find the joy in it.
How do you find peace of mind?
Um, so a lot of that comes from my the spiritual side of things. So I think doing things like prayer, attending the church, those type of spiritual things, I think have really helped me feel peace in my life. Another way I think that I feel peace is just working hard throughout each day. And then if I can end the day, and even if I feel like I'm not where I want to be in different things, if I feel like I gave it my all for any given day, then I can feel like there's usually a amount of peace that comes from that satisfaction of knowing that I did my best.
Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Oh, over for sure.
Why?
Because it's easier to break off from the top. If it's on the bottom, then you've got to like roll it further to be able to have the ripping point. So it's more efficient from the top.
Efficiency, that's the way the patent has it too, so if a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
The first thing that popped into my head was Brian's lyric of the trombone playing wannabe. uh,
That's a good line. See, we dissected the great lines from his. It's like,
that,
hey,
that that was my favorite line of his,
yeah,
rhyming Brian Woodbury with not some trombone playing wannabe.
on a beat, yeah.
That made me laugh so hard the first time I heard it. It was fantastic.
They want to scent the glue in the binding of your autobiography. What would the smell be?
Trying to think, because I don't know that there are any smells associated with myself, at least not good smells. But then it's also like, oh, or is it just something that I would want it to smell like?
Right.
Uh, I guess we'll go with we'll have it smell like new car scent. I don't know.
New car scent. Good.
Nothing to do with me, but it's a good one.
What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
A lot of shifts going on, so I'm just working through that. I think one cultural shift that I'm inspired by is just is the fact that women can do more and be more, or things are getting. I know it's still harder for women,
Yeah.
but I'm encouraged by the fact that things are improving in that aspect, and that there's not as much of that difficulty, a barrier to entry and into whatever they're wanting to do.
Yeah.
As a father of two daughters, I like feeling like they can be confident in themselves and pursue whatever they want to pursue without you know people being stupid to them, which
Yeah,
we've,
and
we've been
and
stupid to
actually,
women for a long time. So
maybe when they're grown up, they'll get a little closer to equal pay. I mean, still,
yeah,
it's a screw job, but it's like, "What?"
yeah.
But that's good. So 2 more, we're out of here. Thornton Wilder said in 1928, "Art is confession. Art is the secret told, but Art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. Brian, you laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
I would say that the music or making art to me is all about making something that evokes an emotion. If it's not from others, at least from myself, you know, something that can take me somewhere or make me feel something that I wouldn't be feeling or I wouldn't be without listening to that piece of music or particular that piece of art.
Yeah, it's beautiful. What gives you the most optimism?
I'd probably say my daughters.
Yeah.
Just how much they learn and grow, and just how amazing they are and how smart they are already, and that just gives me optimism for the future. That, you know, there are others like them, and yeah, that the world will never be shy of people who are smart and making good decisions and keeping progress moving forward.
Really beautiful. Yeah. That's the answer I get the most. It is youth. And it's a full circle. The first question is, what's the best thing for a human being? And you nailed it so well by saying having close family, contentment with family and friends. And Wilhelm Reich, where I got that question, says, what's the best thing for a human being? He said, another human being.
Mm.
And the last question is, what gives you the most optimism? I got was the question they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. And he said, other people. So it's sort of funny that we got together because of the song The Other, Brian Woodbury. And it's like other people. It's been a grand time sharing this with another person. Brian, what a pleasure. I thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sherry.
And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.